From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns.
Hey, it's the Transport Topics RoadSigns team. What follows is not your standard RoadSigns episode. It is a replay of a recent conversation from our TT Newsmakers program. If you don't already know, Transport Topics Newsmakers is a high-level video interview series that features exclusive one-on-one conversations with key industry leaders, offering insights into critical issues affecting the trucking, freight, and logistics industry while providing executives with the expert knowledge to navigate today's complex transportation landscape. Knowing that you like trucking tech and equipment maintenance trends, we thought that you might enjoy hearing specifically from one of the industry's foremost experts, Technology and Maintenance Council's Executive Director, Robert Braswell. You'll hear a familiar voice, too. TT's Seth Clevenger hosts Newsmakers and covers all of trucking's critical concerns. After listening, tell us what you think of Newsmakers in audio at ttn.ws/Newsmakers feedback, and head to ttnews.com/newsmakers to see the series' upcoming guest lineup. Enjoy the interview.
And now, to preview the biggest topics we'll be learning about at TMC's 2025 annual meeting, I'm very excited to bring in Robert Braswell, TMC's Executive Director. Robert, it's great to have you back on TT Newsmakers.
Thanks a lot, Seth. Great to be here.
So TMC's annual meeting is always one of the biggest events on the trucking industry's calendar each year, especially for the leaders on the fleet maintenance side of the industry and who repair and maintain the trucks and keep them rolling. So just to begin the conversation here, could you just give us a quick overview of the agenda for this year's meeting, and how it compares to prior years, and what can attendees expect to see when they head to Nashville in March?
Sure. Well, the theme for this year's 2025 TMC annual meeting is Advancing Technology Through Industry Engagement. And that's really what we're all about here at ATA's Technology and Maintenance Council, is industry engagement. The main focus of our council is development of voluntary industry standards. We call them recommended practices, but there's a lot of other educational benefit that comes out of this process, and it all kind of works together to improve the state of equipment, its maintenance, and maintenance management. I say what's different this year, and in addition to what we've done in the past, there's a whole lot that's the same, but some of the new things that we're doing is that we have two tracks in our educational agenda. We have what we call a back to basics track, and we have an advanced technology track. And so you don't have to pick one or the other. You can go back and forth however you want to, but the idea is we wanted to give a little bit of far-reaching, far horizons content for those that really want to eat that kind of thing up. And then, for the folks that aren't so concerned about automated vehicles and electric vehicles, well, we're going to have all the usual nuts and bolts stuff that makes it so important if you want to maintain today's fleets, because they're just getting ever more complicated. Yeah. And that agenda is perfect for both sides of the equation.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, it's a very large and diverse audience at TMC, and depending on your operations, you may be interested in one of those tracks as opposed to one of the others. And
that's right.
Just kind of looking at the agenda, one of the items that stands out to me, kind of looking ahead to the future of trucking equipment, I noticed there's a very timely technical session called Catching Up with CARB, California Air Resources Board. And of course, CARB has been mandating this transition towards zero emission trucks. But this has been in the news lately because CARB recently withdrew its Advanced Clean Fleets regulation.
That's right.
That would have required trucking companies to phase in EVs over time. Of course, what's still in place, though, is CARB's Advanced Clean Trucks rule.
That's right.
And that puts zero emission sales requirements on the truck OEMs. So it's not like it's all gone, but there's still this regulatory push in California and some other states toward EVs. But that's a moving target, and it's changing right before our eyes. So there's certainly a lot to unpack here, given this shifting regulatory landscape. So I imagine the goal for a session like that is to help to bring some clarity to this complexity and how, and just to understand how California's emission regulations are going to affect and could affect fleet operations in the future, and just help the folks who are there understand how they can prepare themselves for that future. So maybe just talk us through what we can expect attendees to take away from a session like that, and why is this such an important topic right now, especially?
So you're right. So California did withdraw the Advanced Clean Fleet Initiative, or ACF, that affected fleets. However, as you mentioned, the Advanced Clean Truck Regulation, the Act, is still in place. That means you're still going to see, percentages of Class 7 and 8 vehicles rising from, let's say, 5% in 2024. That's what the target was last year, all the way up to 40% by 2032. Somebody's got to buy those trucks. So they're going to be placed into service. And we're going to be talking about that. But what's more, there's also the Clean Truck Check, the CTC, as well as an integrated strategy combining roadside monitoring to screen for potential emissions violations and so forth, using onboard diagnostics data, emissions checks data reporting at certain required intervals. That Clean Truck Check program is still in force. So we're going to be talking about that too, and what fleets need to know if they're going to be doing compliance for that regulation. It's quite a murky bit of soup, and we're going to try to clear it up a little bit as best we can. And it is a moving target. Who knows? Things may change between now and the meeting.
That's right. For sure. It's, it makes it tough if you're, a fleet operator, if you're a fleet executive, and you're trying to plan for the future and you see all these changes. That is not easy to plan ahead in a business where you really want to as best you can.
Right.
While we're on the topic of emission standards for trucking equipment, I also wanted to get your thoughts on, a big topic, in the equipment side of the industry, and that's this anticipation of a pre-buy event for Class 8 trucks. Now looking at probably later this year and into 2026, as trucking companies look to secure build slots for new trucks ahead of the EPA 2027 NOx regulations. So that's going on as well, right? What are your thoughts on a potential pre-buy and maybe some of the conversations we might expect at TMC about equipment acquisition planning in light of those potential market changes in line with the 2027 EPA emission regulations?
Yeah, so TMC did a survey of its members on this very topic a few months back. Wanted to know what the taste was for the fleet audience for a pre-buy. It seems like every time an EPA regulation comes close to its date, there's some sort of a pre-buy. Sometimes it vexes the industry, sometimes it doesn't. What we learned from our survey this time around is that if you're in the market for 7 and 8 class vehicles, you're probably going to engage in a pre-buy. If you're looking for medium duty vehicles, there was less of an appetite for that. So we thought that was interesting. And maybe this because, if people are more inclined to have experimented with alternate fuel or electric vehicles in that smaller market, and they may be more comfortable with that. Now, when you get to the class 7 and 8, it's pretty much just the conventional diesel market, really, that people have the most experience with. So they probably want to stick with what they know for as long as they can. But that was the general finding that we had in that survey, was that the majority of fleets were looking to pre-buy, at least at some level, some more than others, when it comes to their class 7 and 8 combination vehicle purchases.
Yeah, that's helpful, and it's something they'll be watching in the year ahead and beyond. Shifting gears a little bit to technology. Of course, there's a technical session on the agenda focused on data science and software-defined vehicles. I thought that was really interesting.
Right.
And I know this is getting into, maybe a little bit, the technology side of the industry and forward-looking, but I think it'd be helpful just to chat about this a little bit here for our audience who, maybe are kind of new to the idea of software-defined vehicles. And software, of course, is not new on commercial vehicles. That's been around for quite some time. But what we're seeing, I think, is a shift increasingly for the OEMs to move toward trucks that can be continuously upgraded over time through over-the-air software updates. We've seen this progression over the years. But the idea of updating your software on your truck, much like a smartphone, as this plays out, this movement towards software-defined vehicles plays out in the years ahead, how do you see that impacting fleet maintenance operations, right? Fleet maintenance operations are more and more digital. I'm curious to get your thoughts on what this means for the shop environment.
Well, first of all, software-defined vehicle, it kind of is the ultimate extension of what's been going on for the last several years, which is the over-the-air programming, as you mentioned. The good example, we were just talking about California. So right now, the way California works is to show compliance with the law. You got to bring a vehicle into the shop. You got to plug in an OBD enabled tool, and then you have to physically get the information to see if you've passed emissions or not. Well, there's already a standard out there, RP 1226, and soon to be RP 1230. These are TMC recommended practices. They've been on the vehicle now since 2019, I believe it is. You can do all this wirelessly. The problem is California doesn't recognize the standard to allow it. They're thinking about it, but it takes 2 or 3 years to get a law or a regulatory change to make that happen. So that's just a small example. Think of what you can do with the whole vehicle if you are able to do the sort of over-the-air reprogramming of it. So in other words, when the vehicle leaves the factory, you have certain specs set in the various ECMs of the vehicle. Well, that could be dynamically altered or changed, when the vehicle's in service without having to pull it into the shop, right? Maybe some of this can be done over the road, online, over the air. And that's kind of what we're talking about with software-defined vehicles. So there's an advantage that these enhanced tractor trailers can be upgraded. They can be improved after production through software via these over-the-air updates. But there's much more to it than that. Software-defined vehicle architecture maximizes the potential of any hardware that you have. So data centers are kind of a fitting analogy. As with data centers, fleets must have one dashboard where they have all the data interactions, network interactions, and applications can be monitored. And the one dashboard is the location for observing your operational stability, your security, your safety with appropriate third-party interfaces to support all your fleet management and maintenance needs. So if that is enabled, I think the fleet managers are going to find it a very, very useful tool. You're going to be able to do a lot of things more quickly and more efficiently to make your operation not only safer, but more productive.
Yeah, no, it's a great conversation, and we'll see that continue at TMC. And of course, whenever this meeting comes up, we always expect to have plenty of conversations about technicians as well, right? For many years, technician recruiting and retention, has been one of the biggest challenges facing the industry. So naturally, we always hear a lot about that, at a show like TMC each year. Robert, what's the latest you've been hearing about workforce development for the maintenance side of the trucking industry? Any positive developments, continued struggles? Your thoughts on maybe what's changed in the past year or so in terms of that workforce development front for maintenance?
So in terms of getting more folks interested in becoming a commercial vehicle technician, I think there's some good news out there. We have been seeing an upward trend in the number of students going into the chain to go into, let's say, community colleges, for-profit schools, and so forth, coming from either the ag side. Sometimes you get 4F or 4-H clubs, I guess it is, or Future Farmers of America. And even though they may want to work on diesel trucks, let's say, the problem is there's not very many of these programs in different places of the country. Often you have to go into, let's say, an automotive program.
Yeah.
I want to work on trucks, but the problem is there's no program offered in my area. So I'm going to go do an automotive program, and then somehow I'm going to try to take that knowledge and transfer it into the trucking industry. And that's certainly a popular way, although a less than ideal way, to enter into a career as a diesel technician. So we're getting a lot more folks coming in. I think the challenge is once they matriculate from an educational institution, and you got to be reminded that most of the folks that work on trucks, they don't go from, let's say, a school training program into the industry. It's on-the-job training. They get hired by a fleet. They maybe paint curbs, sweep the shop, do the entry level kind of a work, and then they progress themselves on the job into a diesel technician role. But for those that do come, let's say, from a community college or a high school VOTEC program or something like that, there is a difference in expectation, I think, of when they leave and graduate their program and they enter the workplace. And I think the technician retention is where I think a lot of focus needs to be from the fleet side and from the service provider side, to make sure that number one, you're recruiting folks that have the skill set that you need, or have a program in place to get them trained and ready to do the jobs you expect them to do once they do enter your operation. Because very often these new technicians are going to leave in the first 6 months to 1 year. And why is that? Sometimes it's soft skills. It's not even the technical side. There's problems with communicating. There's problems with interacting with other people. There's problems with reading and writing. So, soft skills are very important. But also it's work environment. Sometimes it's not the best work environment. The shops can be dirty. You got to look at your own operation. If you're losing technicians, take a look at your shop. See what's going on. Is it well lit? Is it cold? Is it too hot? Is it hard to get to? You're often putting your new folks on the third shift. That's not always a popular place to start. It seems like, and everybody complains about newer generations, right? That's something that goes way back, probably until time immemorial. But it seems like the previous generations, they didn't mind traveling 50 miles to go to a job site. Younger folks, they don't want to drive 5 miles to get to the job site, and maybe that's a good thing. But you have to adapt
Yeah.
to the changing conditions in the employment world, and these are just some of the things. So I think the focus on technician recruitment, very important. I think those operations that have a good working relationship with their local community college and high school VOTEC programs and maybe for-profit schools that they have in their area, there's no excuse for you not getting the kind of technicians you want, because they're all looking for volunteers to serve on their advisory boards, to advise them of what should be in our curricula to make it more beneficial, so that when you want to hire them, they're going to have their skill set match what you expect. And then on top of that, there's a good reason to have mentor programs.
Yeah.
Mentoring is a big plus when you're bringing on board new personnel. And I just don't mean taking, the grizzled veteran and pairing it up with the new person. It's not necessarily just that. But you want to make sure that there's a relationship there. And you never want the mentor to be the supervisor, okay? You want it to be somebody else in the chain of command. And those fleets and those service providers that have that mentor program, I think they do far better in terms of retaining the technicians that they hire, particularly in those first 2 years.
Yeah. Well, so many great ideas there. So a lot there for folks to unpack, and ideas on how to, get involved with the local vocational schools, and, everything from looking at your work environment and, maybe in ways that you can adjusting the job to fit the preferences of the current workforce. That's all helpful to think about. I do want to go back to something you mentioned at the top of the conversation, Robert, and that's the recommended practices, right? Of course, this is one of the most important ways that TMC contributes to the industry at large, through these RPs that are developed by the study groups and task forces. A lot of that work goes on, of course, at the annual meeting. But just for any viewers who might not be familiar with the recommended practices and the process of approving these and presenting them and sharing them with the industry, just walk us through that process. And also, I'm curious if there are any pending recommended practices that'll be up for discussion in Nashville that really stand out.
Sure. Well, not to get into the minutia of how the recommended practice process unfolds, because we could be here all day. But in short, our volunteer industry standards, we call them TMC recommended practices, or RPs for short. They're developed through the consensus method. We've been doing that since the 1960s. And basically, it works on a system like this. So we have study groups that look for problems. These are long-term committees that try to find out what challenges need to be addressed in the industry. They will create subcommittees we call task forces. They're short-term groups. They get created, they do their work, and they get out of the way. And those are the ones that actually work on the development of recommended practices. It doesn't always have to be a recommended practice that provides a solution. Sometimes it's an educational session. Sometimes it's an information report. Sometimes it's a position paper that we feed into the American Trucking Association's policy apparatus for consideration. But most of the time, it's a recommended practice. And that can either be a maintenance recommended practice or an engineering recommended practice. Some of these deal with maintenance, repair, testing, specification, management. It runs the gamut from everything you could think about, from bumper to bumper on a commercial vehicle, anywhere from class 2, which is almost like a heavy duty pickup truck, all the way up to your articulated vehicles. And so at any one particular annual meeting or fall meeting, we call them general meetings, we have about 100 task forces that meet. And usually there's any number of task forces that are in the end stage where we're balloting recommended practices for adoption. We probably have about 10 of those this time. Sometimes we have as many as 20, 25. And they basically are all about, trying to make sure we have as broad an input from industry, from all the different sectors of industry, not just necessarily, LTL or TL or private sector. We try to get as broad a coalition together to make sure these recommended practices are suitable for as much of the industry as possible. So just for example, some of the things that we're working on and balloting at this meeting, we have a recommended practice on electrical vehicle pre-trip inspection. We have another one on service diagnostics process for road service. We have one on wheel seal and bearing maintenance. Now that's an update for a longstanding recommended practice. And these recommended practices are reviewed every 5 years at minimum to ensure that they're still relevant to the industry. So I'd say usually about 50% of the recommended practices are actually updates of existing recommended practices. Some of the other ones deal with things like, rear bumper dimensions. That's kind of boring, but it's important. Then we have some more of the more exciting, newer things like charge cycle optimization and energy management for battery electric vehicles. In addition to things like tractor trailer access, entry and egress issues. So electric coolants for electric vehicles is another one. There's just a bunch of them. Like I say, we probably have it's really more than, there's 10 task forces, probably about 20 recommended practices that are being considered for adoption. Most of the time they always get adopted. Sometimes they don't. They have to go back to task force to be worked on. If they do get balloted and approved at the TMC annual meeting, for example, it will then go into what we call an appeal period for 90 days. So that we put out a legal notice and publications such as Transport Topics, so that everybody, even outside of the council, get a chance to see, hey, this is what TMC is going to be adopting. Do you have an opinion? And if they do, and if it's valid, we will, even if it's not valid, we still bring it back to the task force for their consideration, and they will either dismiss it, adopt it, or mull on it for a while. So, and if it passes all of that, then it's published in our recommended practice collection. We have over 550 recommended practices. That's probably about 4,000 pages if you actually printed it of technical standards. It's quite a collection.
Yeah, well, it's a great resource for the industry, and I'd say that especially now, given some of the recent changes in trucking equipment, emission systems, also introduction of new types of propulsion systems, battery electric in our industry. There's a lot that's new and a lot that needs to be learned. So I think it makes those recommended practices all the more important as more and more companies work with different types of trucks.
I think two of the areas that we've really been focused on lately in terms of the more advanced stuff is advanced driver assistance systems, or ADAS. Been developing some standardization for that. Also automated vehicles and electric vehicles. So that's where a lot of that new energy has been going towards. But there's so much of the industry that has issues with just everyday regular nuts and bolts kinds of things, and we are working on those as well.
Yeah. So I've been attending TMC events really for more than a decade now. Time flies when you're having fun, but I often find that some of the best conversations just kind of happen, through chance meetings in the hallway, people you bump into they weren't expecting, and maybe you are walking through the exhibit hall and see something new and interesting that you wouldn't have seen before. I kind of think back to the pandemic, and when that hit, all the conferences either shut down or shifted to a virtual format. I remember, I definitely missed I felt, the absence of those types of conversations, and, the opportunity to see people and have those conversations face to face, and also see trucks and technology and components up close. Trade shows, of course, have definitely made a comeback since then, but, I just kind of want to get your perspective on the value of in-person events, right? And of course, for a while we were without them, and now they're back. But it seems like to me that there's real value in being able to have some of these conversations and see some of this stuff in person.
Well, I've been with the council for 33 years, and I think your assessment is just as valid now as it was back when I first started in 1992. I think the in-person component to what trade associations do is invaluable. It is an indispensable thing. I think that's one of the reasons why TMC was without that component for a very short time during the COVID pandemic. I think in 2020, we had to go completely virtual. By 2021, we had our trade show back. And it's been growing every year since we've reestablished it in 2021, following that one-year hiatus. This year's numbers are fantastic. We're looking at numbers that rival, if not exceed, the ones we had in 2019 before the pandemic. So I think you're spot on. I think there's a lot of interest in participating in an event like the Technology and Maintenance Council offers, particularly because of the nature of the event. It's not just a trade show. It is an industry event that combines, the development of industry standards. It has a broad and deep educational program, and it has a technology display that is primarily commercial and that is primarily non-commercial, which is unusual in the industry. I think having a non-commercial focus to our trade show is what makes it different. The folks that come to TMC are more than likely to be your directors of engineering, your vice presidents of engineering, as opposed to the marketing and sales folks. So when you're going by the booths or you're talking to the people with the yellow badges of the fleets, they're going to be the technical experts. And technical experts are going to be talking to other technical experts. And sometimes where the associates or the vendors tell us that they spend just as much time, if not more, talking to other technical people in the associate side, right? They're talking to the OEM engineers and the other tier one suppliers and further down the food chain, so to speak. So there's a lot of cross pollination between technical experts at our meeting. I think that really is what is the draw for TMC.
Yeah, sure. And maybe going back quickly to the the educational side of the event, there are also plenty of study group sessions on the agenda here. That's an important part of TMC as well.
Sure.
Just looking through the list, I see sessions on topics like recalibration and repair of advanced driver assist systems you mentioned earlier. Also stuff like safety for roadside repairs and towing, right? Maybe safety procedures, kind of again nuts and bolts, but very important and applicable, across much of the industry. Addressing air system contamination, refrigerated trailer maintenance. Those are some of the topics that if you really want to dive into one of those topics, there's a chance to do that. But you're really covering a lot of ground there. Robert, if you had to highlight maybe just a few study group sessions, what are some that stand out to you?
Let's talk about ADAS for a second. The crash course in ADAS recalibration and repair to me is very important. A lot of fleets are adopting ADAS technology. It has the potential to offer savings for operation and improve safety. But if it's not in proper working order, it's not going to be doing the job it's intended to be doing. And let's say you have a crash, you have some sort of a collision. If you can repair the fender, you can fix the bumper, but if you're not recalibrating those sensors and those cameras and you're not doing it properly, your ADAS systems may not be working, and then you're going to have problems. And it's not necessarily a simple thing to do. Some of the things we're learning is that you have to have a lot of room around the vehicle, open space, to calibrate properly. Well, if you ever go to an operation where they're repairing vehicles, they're doing collision repair, the place is packed. There's not a lot of room on the floor. Where are they doing the calibration? Are they doing it in a space that has sufficient area around the vehicle for the calibration to be proper? A lot of people don't think about that. Are they just pencil whipping the recalibration? That's another thing you got to be worried about. Checkbox looks good to me, but is it? How do you know? So I think that's going to be a very eye-opening session. I think a lot of fleets are going to be thinking about, are we doing the right thing when it comes to maintaining and recalibrating our ADAS systems, particularly after a collision? Yeah.
So this is an investment, and of course, this is a way to improve safety and support your drivers. So you want to make sure that they're, certainly in proper working order. Make sure that all the sensors and all the systems are working properly. Of course, I only touched on it briefly, but in addition to all the task force meetings, study groups, technical sessions, there's also a very extensive exhibit hall at TMC at the annual meeting. It's full of trucking equipment and technology. See this, of course, as an opportunity to check out the latest and greatest from the truck and trailer manufacturers, various industry suppliers. technology and service vendors as well. Maybe just give us a quick sense of what we'll see in the exhibit hall this year. I know you can't, lift the curtain completely, but what do you expect? What can we expect to see in general? And also, why is it valuable to take that opportunity to connect with exhibitors while you're at the show?
Well, first of all, I can say that we're sold out. So it must be a popular destination. I think we have over 375 exhibiting companies that will be joining us in Nashville at the Music City Center. So the convention hall will be completely jam-packed with all sorts of different technologies, ranging from the very largest suppliers to the smallest suppliers. And I think the reason that cross-pollination, like we talked about, is important is because it's probably the largest, and I'd say it is the largest technical display of that features information presented in a non-commercial way that you're going to find in the industry. So, it's not so much about selling you a particular product as it is trying to educate you on the benefits of why a particular product is good for your operation. How is it going to benefit safety? How is it going to improve your operational expenses? It's going to be all about the technology, not about selling. And I think that's a big difference. The other thing too is that it's so hard to keep up with things. You got the internet, but unless you actually have a chance to talk to some of the experts that develop the technology, particularly the cutting edge stuff, are you really getting all the information that you need from, let's say, an internet search? Probably not. Particularly how complicated the vehicle is these days in terms of how it is integrated. It used to be most of the vehicles were horizontally integrated. That meant you, the fleet manager, was basically speccing the vehicle on your own. And putting this, that, and the other. Now, they're highly integrated. But what does that mean? That means, there's all these systems that are interdependent on each other without as much customization, but you still have to know how to optimize that vehicle for your operation, because the manufacturers, they'll build a vanilla truck if they can, but 9 times out of 10, that vanilla truck is not going to be suited. It's not going to be optimized for the kind of operation that your fleet has. And that's really where the wheat is separated from the chaff when it comes to you being a successful fleet manager, making sure that your specifications will prove successful in operation.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a very big show floor, so my advice to attendees is always to wear comfortable shoes to go around and see everything. But in addition to the exhibit hall, in recent years, TMC's also had some vehicle ride-alongs and static displays from industry technology vendors, technology developers. I expect we'll see some of those opportunities again this year.
Yeah, that's true. Our ride-along and static display program is back for 2025. Some of the companies that I know are participating in that include companies like Range Energy, Stone Ridge, Turbic Taylor Americas. They'll have displays along what used to be called Fifth Avenue. I think it's Representative John Lewis Avenue. And in addition to what's in the exhibit hall, you'll be able to go out into that street area between the Omni Hotel and the Convention Center and check out some of those technologies out there. And you'll be able to, it's not a ride and drive this time; it's a ride along.
Yes.
But I think it's a very useful adjunct to the TMC experience.
Sure. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I think we're feeling ready for Nashville. But before I let you go, Robert, I'd like to just open it up to hear any final thoughts you'd like to share as folks get ready for the annual meeting. What should they know as they get ready to head to Nashville?
Well, it's going to be an extravaganza of technical activity and maintenance and repair information. You're going to find so many different types of folks there. You're going to see a broad coalition of academics, educators, service providers, fleets of all types, and of course, all the different kinds of vendors and equipment providers that the industry has to offer, and all working together to try to improve the state of art of maintenance, its equipment, and maintenance management. And we've been doing that since 1956, and we're proud to be continuing that into the 21st century.
Well, hey, really appreciate the conversation, Robert. Very insightful, and as always, and we're all looking forward to the show. I look forward to attending myself here very soon. But thank you again for joining the program and sharing your thoughts with us.
My pleasure.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Road Signs. Be sure to sign up for TMC at ttn.ws/TMC25, and don't forget to mention that TT sent you. We can't wait to see you there.